My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to 106.7 Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Now, in case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. In this episode of our show, we will discuss your future under a Democrat United States House of Representatives, including the likelihood, nay certainty, that the next Speaker of the House will be none other than Madam Moonbat herself, Nancy Pelosi. Now, you might be saying, yeah, but the Republicans in the Senate will stop whatever idiocy the House sends them. Well, as we will discuss shortly, I wouldn't count on that. But first, this just in from the Voice of Tolerance. As you know, the left sanctimoniously preaches that we should all be tolerant with people of varying ethnicities and gender orientations, while themselves practicing hate, even violence, against those who choose to disagree, those who dare to disagree. In our semi-regular segment, this just in from the Voice of Tolerance, we discuss the latest leftist hypocrisy in the hopes that people will eventually understand exactly what they are dealing with. I was planning to talk about how America's Got Talent alumni Benton Blount abruptly lost his opening act gig on ZZ Top guitarist Billy Gibbons' concert tour after his pro-Trump Facebook message got him banned from the social media website. And this, by the way, was a pretty mild thing. Anyways, Blount was 4 shows into the 7-show slot when he learned he was kicked off the tour, South Carolina's Greenville News reported. The Post showed Blount wearing a red Make America Great Again hat and an I voted sticker. Ooh, that's pretty heavy stuff there, I voted. I voted sticker on Election Day while holding a Chick-fil-A sandwich and a drink. The photo carried the caption, "Someone reading this just got offended multiple times. My work here is done. #vote." Pretty bad stuff. I guess that ought to get him removed from a concert tour. But even that pales in comparison to our next example of leftist intolerance. You may have heard that the violent leftists of Antifa, no longer satisfied to harass Ted Cruz in a restaurant, have now moved to mob violence directed at the wives and children of public figures. Specifically, earlier this week, Smash DC, an Antifa-affiliated mob, attacked the home of Fox News commentator Tucker Carlson. Although Carlson himself wasn't home, his wife and children became targets of the leftist mob. According to LifeSiteNews.com, the mob began chanting, quote, "Tucker Carlson, we will fight. We know where you sleep at night. Racist scumbag, leave town." The group also chanted, "No borders, no walls, no USA at all." That pretty much says it all. And tweeted that Carlson, quote, "cannot hide from the people you hurt with your rhetoric, your lies, and your hate." His hate. I like that. The Daily Caller adds that Carlson was at the Fox office at the time, but his wife Susie was home. Quote, "She had been in the kitchen alone getting ready to go to dinner, and she heard pounding on the front door and screaming," Carlson explained to the Washington Post. "Someone started throwing himself against the front door and actually cracked the front door. Assuming the attack to be a home invasion, she locked herself in a pantry and called the police, who arrived minutes later. But here is the real kicker: the fact it depicts what your life will be like under regime controlled by the left, if you don't stop them. Who exactly does Antifa blame for the violence? Why, Carlson himself, of course. According to the website BabylonBee.com, quote, as critics denounced the frightening actions of the mob, the group stood firm, claiming it was Carlson's own fault for not parroting leftist talking points on his program. Quote, there's a really easy way not to get mobbed in public places or your own home. March in lockstep with the leftist agenda, said a Smash Racism DC spokesman. This is out of their own words. It's really simple. You must march in lockstep with the leftist agenda, in their own words. What do you think we're going to do? Disagree civilly? Yeah, right, he added. The group also warned other people that if angry, violent protesters show up at their houses or places of business and threaten or assault them, it's their own fault. Victim blaming here. You're really asking for it if you can't take the easy step of nodding your agreement to every position of the far left. We can't help ourselves, you know. Unhinged leftists will be unhinged leftists, after all. End quote. Well, here's my little message to the unhinged leftists of the world. As a public figure myself, who has drawn threats from leftists, let me inform you that anyone who attempts to forcibly and unlawfully enter the home or motor vehicle or workplace of myself or my family will be met with deadly force in accordance with North Carolina's Castle Doctrine law, and will quite possibly go home in a bag. But never mind that, because after all, the unhinged leftists aren't the biggest threat to safety on the planet. You are. At least according to Fox News, that's what a spokesman for a Democratic group supporting the former Tennessee Governor Phil Bredesen in his run for the U.S. Senate seat, when he referred to, quote, white male gun owners as American gun nuts in response to a Facebook post asking people to identify the biggest terrorist organization on the planet, according to a report. So, according to the Democrats, you, as a white male American gun nut, are the biggest terrorist organization on the planet. Just want to make sure we had that straight. Mark Brown, Communications Director for Tennessee Victory 2018, a group backing Bredesen's run against Republican U.S. Representative Marsha Blackburn for the open seat occupied by retiring Republican Senator Bob Corker, posted the comment in 2015. The Washington Free Beacon reported, "Oh, you'll be happy to know that Bredesen lost." In our next segment, we'll talk about a phenomena coming too soon to a state near you, which I call death by red flag law, in which the latest gun control fad has now started killing gun owners. And also about the failure of just such a law to stop yet another mass killing in, of all places, the gun control utopia otherwise known as California. We will also talk about the relatively recent surge in AR-15 pistols, now that the BATF, that's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, should be BATFE actually, has rescinded its previous ban on shouldering the pistol stabilizing braces that have become so popular. But that didn't stop the ATF from prosecuting an Ohio man by claiming that his AR-15 pistol was in fact an illegal short-barreled rifle. More on that in the next segment. Some of you have expressed interest in our previous shows, so please allow me to take a moment to tell you how you can get previous episodes of Guns, Politics, and Freedom. They are all on YouTube, and you can search them by using the phrase Guns, Politics, and Freedom Radio Show, but even easier, you can check them out on my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. Again, that's gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, where you can find in-depth analysis of events and trends significant to gun rights and, generally speaking, the preservation of our republic. gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. Right now, we're going to take a break. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. After we return, we will come back with still more critical information enabling you to better defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallona, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. After the Parkland, Florida killings, in which the murderer was well known to police, who had, by the way, been called to his home literally dozens of times, gun control advocates began pushing yet another proposed salvation, this one to save us from what they deemed to be dangerous people. Called gun violence restraining orders, or red flag laws, or sometimes extreme risk protection orders, the first thing to know about extreme risk protection orders is that they don't protect anybody. What they do is to allow somebody, be it a relative, ex-wife, acquaintance, or even in some cases a co-worker or maybe a neighbor, to decide that you are somehow dangerous and need to have your guns confiscated. And by the way, their assessment pretty much holds sway, because they go to a judge who holds an ex parte or emergency hearing, which could happen at any time of the night or day, or weekends, or any other time. And here is the real kicker. It requires you to be given no notice or opportunity to defend yourself in court prior to the confiscation of your firearms. Quite literally, the police show up at your door to confiscate your guns without you even knowing it. You do later get a hearing and maybe an opportunity to get them back eventually. However, if the judge deems it, the order may be continued indefinitely, depriving you of your gun rights. This, of course, is a violation of the requirement to give you Fifth Amendment due process to law and of Fourth Amendment protections of unreasonable search or seizure before revoking your constitutionally guaranteed freedoms. But no matter, that's irrelevant to these laws as the advocates of them see it. Pursuant to these restraining orders passed in Florida, the state of Washington, Maryland, and elsewhere, police are busy confiscating guns from owners who have broken no laws. And by the way, it isn't just Democrats pushing these laws. They were passed by a Republican-led legislature in Florida. But what the laws do not do is to prevent dangerous people from potentially killing others. The person deemed dangerous is still out on the streets, free to roam at will. In at least one case, a mass killer still had at least one gun, which he used for mayhem, despite revocation of his Illinois governmental permission slip to own guns. And, of course, absolutely nothing prevents the dangerous person from using a motor vehicle, knife, or some other weapon to wreak havoc. So, what happened here? Well, it appears that Maryland's brand new red flag law, passed just this spring, has claimed its first victim. 61-year-old Gary Willis, a resident of Ferndale, Maryland, was awakened one Monday morning at 5:17 a.m. when two officers from Anne Arundel County knocked on his door. A law-abiding gun owner, Willis answered the door, quote, with a gun in his hand. as would I, by the way, according to a police department spokesman. They were there to serve him with an extreme risk protective order and remove his legally owned firearms. Remove, I like that. Confiscate. As I say, at 5 a.m., if somebody beats on my door, I'm going to answer with a gun in my hand, too. Well, according to the spokesman, Willis put the firearm down to read the ERPO, that's Extreme Risk Protective Order, but then apparently recognizing that it wasn't a legal search warrant issued by a judge in accordance with protections guaranteed him by the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, heaven forbid that we should have those protections, but instead was issued by a local judge under Maryland's newly minted red flag law, he retrieved his firearm. The spokesman said that Willis became irate. I would be irate. In the melee that followed, one of the firearms carried either by one of the officers or by Willis went off. One of the officers then pulled his own sidearm and shot Willis dead. And what precipitated this senseless killing? A family argument over the care of an elderly relative in which Willis made a comment another relative didn't like, who then called police. As the website This Ain't Hell so eloquently put it, just like that, a man is dead because of a comment and the red flag law in Maryland. No investigation, no probable cause, just a phone call from an irate relative. Imagine. I'm calling this death by red flag law. As one publication put it, Willis isn't the first citizen to be caught in the red flag web, just the first one to die as a result. Unsurprisingly, Broward County, where most of Florida's ills seem to begin, especially related to elections, is the most aggressive of any Florida county in its use of its new freedom to violate its citizens' rights and protections granted under the Fourth Amendment. Says the New American, quote, within 6 weeks of passage of the law, Broward County had successfully obtained 34 such EPOs. According to Florida's Sun Sentinel, half of those court orders were related to bad behavior on social media. Be careful what you post. One example will suffice. A Pembroke Pines teenage girl was brought into police headquarters and subjected to more than 2 hours of questioning about her posts on social media. No attorney was present. None was needed. After all, the right to lawyer up isn't part of the new law. Said Pembroke Pines Police Captain Al Zeeks, the police department, and this is a quote, the police department will pursue those risk protection orders in accordance with the new law when we determine that it is necessary in order to protect the public's safety. Think about that. What we have here is police who are themselves issuing the extreme risk protection orders after deciding they don't like what you post on social media. Then they detain you and confiscate your firearms. This is the stuff of police states. Yeah, you say, but that's just Florida. That won't happen in North Carolina. Well, folks, Representative Marcia Morey of Durham introduced just such legislation in the last session of the General Assembly. And by the way, Morey got reelected just last week. We now have Democrats controlling the governor's mansion, the attorney general's office, and the courts. Meanwhile, Republicans are running scared, having had their supermajorities whittled down to a bare minimum majority. So when it comes to defending your rights, assume nothing. Oh, and while we're on the topic of the effectiveness of red flag laws, what happened in California? Now, it couldn't have been a mass killing in a bar by a shooter, specifically a former Marine, well known to police, since, of course, California already has particularly draconian red flag laws. Why didn't they get him? And it couldn't have been with a Glock 21 with so-called high-capacity magazines, since mere possession of those magazines is already banned in California. And it couldn't have been in an ostensibly gun-free zone, enforced, by the way, by a metal detector, which reportedly prevented no fewer than 6, count them 6, off-duty police from carrying firearms inside the bar, since, after all, we all know that gun-free zones are the preferred method for preventing mass killings. Nope, you won't hear any of that from the media. What you will hear, ad infinitum, is from Susan Orfanos, whose son was killed at the Borderline bar after supposedly surviving the Las Vegas shootings. This, by the way, unverified. And the chances of that would be astronomically small. I will want to see more about that. But what you will hear from the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi as they push new gun control in the Democrat-controlled House is Orfanos' words as she said to media, and I quote, "I don't want prayers. I don't want thoughts. I want gun control. And I hope to God nobody sends me any more prayers. I want gun control. No more guns." As always, the proposed solution for failed gun control is still more gun control. In our next segment, we will offer a cautionary tale from the annals of arcane gun laws, this one concerning prosecution of a law-abiding owner who thought his AR-15 pistol with stabilizing brace was complying with the law. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, and we're going to take a short break, after which we will return with still more critical information enabling you to better defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallona, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Now, I once, not long ago, taught a course at a prepper conference, and my course was entitled Getting Ready, Not Arrested, Gun Laws for Preppers. And I opened up my class by saying, and I quote, "Welcome to the Sunday morning meeting of Felons Anonymous. My name is Paul, and I'm a felon." I then proceeded to point out how, if any of them actually had the audacity to carry firearms, even with lawful concealed handgun permits, almost certainly they were felons due to the thousands of arcane gun laws, and arcane and virtually indecipherable gun laws, which make them criminals. Now, as I noted before the break, here we have a cautionary tale from the annals of arcane gun laws. If you are like thousands of other gun owners, you may have in your collection an AR-15 pistol. Maybe you are contemplating getting one, since their compactness makes them hugely popular. Before I start, please allow me to add the caveat that I am not a lawyer, and nothing you are about to hear constitutes legal advice. You would be well advised to verify all the information you get here from sources that are far more reputable than I am. Now, as you may recall, Sig Sauer introduced the concept of pistol stabilizing braces together with SB Tactical to help returning wounded war vets with disabilities shoot their otherwise heavy and cumbersome AR-15 pistols. At issue is whether the stabilizing braces, if used as stocks, could violate the law if put to the shoulder and used as shoulder stocks. After all, if a firearm has a shoulder stock and a barrel of less than 16 inches, or an overall length of less than 26 inches, it is considered to be a short-barreled rifle, or SBR, and is regulated under the National Firearms Act of 1934 and may be owned only with BATF approval after a background check, a fee of $200, and the issuance of a tax stamp. Tax stamp, yes. There's a long story there, but I will save that for another time. Now, when SIG first sought ATF approval, they received it because the brace was not designed to be used from the shoulder. Under the Obama administration, however, and undoubtedly under orders from Obama to harass gun owners, the ATF changed its mind, deciding that if the stabilizing brace was used as intended, it was legal, but if you shouldered the implement, you had, quote, redesigned the gun and made it into an illegal, unregistered SBR, a 10-year federal felony. I maintain this is like saying, if I take a hairbrush and use it to brush my teeth, I have redesigned the hairbrush and it is now a toothbrush. But anyways, I digress. Under the relatively gun-friendly Trump administration, however, the ATF again reversed itself, saying that use from the shoulder does not by itself redesign the firearm. To wit, the ATF says, and I quote, "With respect to stabilizing braces, ATF has concluded that attaching the brace to a handgun as a forearm brace does not, quote, make, end quote, a short-barreled rifle, because in the configuration as submitted to and approved by FATD, it is not intended to be, and cannot comfortably be, fired from the shoulder. If, however, the shooter-possessor takes affirmative steps to configure the device for use as a shoulder stock, for example, configuring the brace so as to permanently affix it to the end of a buffer tube, thereby creating a length that has no other purpose than to facilitate its use as a stock, or removing the arm strap or otherwise undermining its ability to be used as a brace, and then in fact shoots the firearm from the shoulder using the accessory as a shoulder stock, that person has objectively, quote, redesigned the firearm for purposes of the NFA. Here's the latest version. This conclusion is not based upon the mere fact that a firearm was fired from the shoulder at some point. Therefore, an NFA firearm has not necessarily been made when the device is not reconfigured for use as a shoulder stock, even if the attached firearm happens to be fired from the shoulder. So, in other words, if you don't modify it and you happen to put it to your shoulder, then they say that's not a violation of law. Now, but attempting to comply with the law doesn't necessarily mean you're saved from prosecution. We go to the site Range 365, which says, and I quote, "The Prince Law Firm's blog recently brought attention to the case of U.S. versus Wright, in which the Northern Ohio man is charged with a series of violations regarding the accessories he added to a Sharps Brothers AR-15 pistol known as the Jack. The ATF alleges that the added parts created a short-barreled rifle, which the defendant did not register as required by the National Firearms Act. According to the evidence list for the upcoming trial, the equipment that brought about the alleged infraction included a Maxim CQB pistol AR-15 PDW brace, Stark Express angled foregrip, and a flash suppressor that added about 2 inches to the 7.75-inch barrel. These items were all previously approved by the Firearms and Ammunition Technology Division, the arm of the ATF, charged with responding to technical inquiries and testing and classifying products submitted to them for review, as well as providing technical service to the firearms industry and members of the public. Luckily, there was a happy ending to the saga, with the jury returning a not guilty verdict after a short deliberation. The most alarming part of this indictment is that the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Ohio even sought to prosecute the case. The Prince's Law Office's blog went so far as to say that the U.S. Attorney's Office invented the charges, quote, out of whole cloth, completely fabricating the entire basis for the case. The U.S. Attorney's Office even went so far as to bar the approval letters from the ATF's Firearm and Ammunition Technology Division from being used in court. The trial pitted ATF firearms expert officer Eve Eisenbeis as an expert witness for the government against the defendant's expert Richard Vasquez, a former employee of the Firearms and Ammunition Technology Division. Eisenbeis held that the Maxim defense extension was a shoulder stock, while Vasquez and the jury concluded it was not. Now, there are two sides to every story. One of the caveats of pistol stabilizing braces, which I strongly suggest you adhere to, is that you may not modify the brace in any way which facilitates using the brace as a shoulder stock. And apparently the gun owner did add a rubber cane tip to the brace, reportedly to allow him to stand the gun up in his gun safe. Now, before you dismiss this as a case of a guy who made an unwise, if well-intended modification to the gun, however, there are a couple more things you should know. For starters, the ATF maintained that the cane tip was an illegal modification because it increased the length of the stabilizing brace to no more than 13.5 inches. The teensy-weensy little problem here is that the ATF has never mentioned a 13.5-inch restriction in any public communication. They did mention it to manufacturers, but the accused, of course, had no way of knowing about that restriction. Moreover, although the 13.5-inch length of pull should be correctly measured horizontally from the center of the trigger to the center of the butt of the gun, the tricky SOBs at the ATF measured it diagonally, making a distance longer than 13.5 inches from one that was actually not. And incidentally, this led to a discussion with a gun-knowledgeable coworker of mine over whether you can add a vertical foregrip to an AR-15 pistol. We looked this up on the site of lawyer John Pierce at johnpierceesq.com. Pierce being P-I-E-R-C-E. John Pierce ESQ as in Esquire.com. And we discovered that the answer is, well, yes and no. Specifically, according to Pierce, if the gun is over 26 inches in length, the shoulder stock extended, that's the minimum length of a rifle under the NFA, you may add the vertical foregrip. If, however, it's less than 26 inches, adding the vertical foregrip makes it an any other weapon in the eyes of the ATF, and it's subject to all the restrictions of NFA 34. Now, the website Truth About Guns dismisses some of the concerns, saying the prevalent take is that the ATF has unilaterally changed their interpretations of the law, altered their earlier rulings on AR pistol extensions, and are about to come for our pistol braces. Nothing could be further from the truth. The site goes on to say that although Wright was prosecuted, the ATF fell short in the case, and he was not convicted. Well, that's all well and good until you consider the $20,000 or so in court costs and legal fees that it took him to clear his good name. We're going to take a break right now. We'll come back and talk about this some more. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. And after the break, we will give you more critical ammunition to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Before the break, we were talking about AR-15 pistols and other semi-automatic pistols with pistol stabilizing braces and the prosecution of a man in Ohio who assumed his gun was in compliance with ATF regulations. He was prosecuted for creating an illegal short-barreled rifle because he chose to put a cane tip on the pistol stabilizing brace. Now, my advice to you in general is 1. Absolutely do not modify the pistol stabilizing brace. 2. You must ensure that the length of pull on that brace, the distance between the trigger and the end of the buttstock, measured perhaps diagonally as the ATF did, not horizontally as it's supposed to be done. But in any case, that distance should be less than 13.5 inches. And if the overall length of the gun with the stock extended is less than 26 inches, do not add a vertical foregrip, or you will have created an any other weapon, which is regulated by the 1934 National Firearms Act by the ATF. Now, in our last segment, I want to discuss the implications of the election on gun rights. As for the implications in North Carolina, I'd like to say we gave as good as we got. And thanks to you, there was no blue wave in North Carolina. When asked how we did in the election, I've been saying, well, we repelled the Mongol horde at the gate, but with casualties. Among our victories and losses, our biggest win was in sending Mark Harris to Congress in the 9th Congressional District. Unlike the previous office holder, Robert Pittenger, who voted for gun control for the first time this year and lost his GRNC Political Victory Fund recommendation for so doing, Harris has promised to sponsor pro-gun legislation and to join other patriots like Mark Meadows, Republican of the 11th District in western North Carolina, in the Congressional Freedom Caucus. Equally heartening was our successful defense of Representative Ted Budd in the 13th District, who, as you recall, is not only a congressman but a gun shop owner and who, like Harris, was targeted by millions of dollars in out-of-state left-wing money. Suffice to say that while the Democrats might now control the U.S. House, it wasn't the result of failures in North Carolina. Now, judicial races here in North Carolina were less successful, with anti-gun Democrat Anita Earls winning the Supreme Court race and anti-gun Democrats winning Court of Appeals races, albeit by, in some cases, only about 1%. Now, you may recall that an anti-gun Hollywood super PAC, calling itself One Vote at a Time, had targeted these judicial races with hundreds of thousands of dollars in out-of-state left-wing money. General Assembly races were kind of a mixed bag. Republicans retained control of both chambers, but by less than the supermajority margins they enjoyed recently. Now they have margins of control of about 29 to 21 in the Senate and about 66 to 54 in the House, although those numbers could change slightly depending on recounts in tight races. In the North Carolina Senate, redistricting forced on us by leftist judges cost us 3 pro-gun legislators, namely Wesley Meredith, Trudy Wade, and Jeff Tart. Happily, however, pro-gun stalwart Carl Ford won his race for an open seat. As you may recall, GRNC Political Victory Fund heavily supported Ford, who previously served in the House, in his primary against anti-gun former House Representative Sam Watford. In the North Carolina House, most Republicans who lost their seats were rhinos, those like Chris Malone with his 74% voting record and a GRNC 2-star evaluation, mediocre, and Nelson Dollar with a 78% voting record and a 3-star evaluation. Happily, all pro-gun stalwarts won re-election, including Jay Adams of Catawba County, George Cleveland, Larry Pittman, who has been a big stalwart in the North Carolina House, and Michael Speciale. Now, what's next, you ask? Well, in North Carolina, what happens from here will likely be bitter trench warfare between deeply dug-in opponents. Emboldened leftists will introduce various gun bans, particularly red flag gun confiscation bills. While one might suppose a Republican-led legislature might kill such bills by denying them committee hearings, the fact is that Republicans are under pressure and there are a lot of new faces in Raleigh, making that anything but a certainty. For our own part, we will again introduce pro-gun legislation, but we will have to work hard to overcome a likely veto by anti-gun Democrat Governor Roy Cooper. The bigger war will be in Congress, where once and future Speaker Moonbat, a.k.a. Nancy Pelosi, has said that a Democrat House will make gun control a top priority. But you say the Republican Senate won't pass gun control sent by the House? Don't bet on it. History is full of gun control passed thanks to compromises by squishy Republicans up to and including the 1994 so-called assault weapon ban. One thing you can count on hearing from is Susan Orfanos, or one person I guess you can count on hearing from, Susan Orfanos, the mother of the borderline bar victim, who has said loudly and clearly that she wants No more guns, in those words. I have absolutely no doubt that she will become the poster child for Everytown for gun safety, and I have absolutely no doubt that Pelosi and company will use her as a poster child to spearhead a draconian gun control bill. And rest assured that a mother with a dead son crying for gun control will place extreme pressure on Republicans, just as it did after Parkland in Florida. Regardless of what their core constituency wants, and regardless of the fact that the proposals won't save lives any more than California's previous gun control and may in fact cost lives. If you think that won't happen, always remember that in formulating public policy, facts rarely hold sway over emotions. In closing, I want you to take away the following lessons from this election. I grant you the Democrats got little for the untold millions they spent to impose their agenda on you. It wasn't for lack of effort. But recently, renowned columnist Patrick Buchanan compared our present time to the 1960s, talking about leftist violence then versus now, demonstrations, civil unrest. He didn't discuss how that violence is now being, if not sanctioned, at least justified by the leadership of the Democrat Party. Regardless of where Democrats won or lost, they sought massive gun control. Washington state owners now find themselves saddled with a ballot initiative which registers semi-automatic firearms and their owners. In a Georgia governor's race, Democrat Stacey Abrams is busy trying to force a recount for an election she clearly lost. That would be the same Stacey Abrams who promised to round up so-called assault weapons if elected. And of course, in Broward County, the perennial site of Democrat vote stealing, Democrat elections officials under the direction of Brenda Snipes are busy trying to manufacture enough votes to steal the Senate race in which Republican Rick Scott's 15,000 vote lead over Democrat Bill Nelson seems to be dwindling daily as trucks roll into the Broward County Board of Elections in the dead of night. And speaking of Florida, Democrat and gun control supporter Andrew Gillum is within tenths of a percent of winning the governor's race. What Patrick Buchanan fails to realize is that in terms of competing visions for America, this is not 1968. And I want you to take away from this midterm 3 important lessons. First, unlike the 60s, today radicalism has gone mainstream. Socialism and the violence to create it are being promoted by leading figures, including newly elected Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Second, there is absolutely nothing the left will not do to gain power. As Justice Kavanaugh discovered, there is no character they will not assassinate. As the voters of Florida discovered in 2000 and again this year, there is no election they will not try to steal. And as House Majority Whip Steve Scalise discovered, there is no conservative they will not try to kill. Finally, and most importantly, I want you to understand something which many will deny and some may even laugh at. And that final lesson is this. In our current political climate, and thanks to the multi-generational long march of the left to take over our cultural institutions, our schools, and the media, we are at any given time one election away from losing our freedom. If you fail to be vigilant for even one election cycle, our republic, as we know it, will end. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, America's largest gun shop, Hyatt Guns, at HyattGuns.com. See you next Sunday at 5.